On the day of my coming-of-age ceremony, heavy snow fell as he announced our betrothal was off. His gaze lingered tenderly upon the confident, vibrant woman in crimson beside him. The crown prince's consort shall only ever be Uru. After the annulment, the capital lost a dignified, composed future consort and gained the unrestrained, radiant Yushi. Later, he regretted it. He knelt all night in the imperial study, begging the emperor to renew the betrothal. But he didn't know that in this life, I would never repeat the mistakes of my past existence. This lifetime, my only wish is to stay as far away from him as possible. On the day of my coming-of-age ceremony, the snow fell heavily. Xiao Zicheng did not attend my coming-of-age ceremony, but after the guests had departed, he arranged to meet me outside the palace grounds. Clutching the matching pendants he had given me, I trudged through the deep snow, alone, to keep our appointment. He stood there, holding a bamboo-jointed umbrella. Beside him leaned a woman whose crimson robe seemed to outshine the blood itself. I knew it was Sun Yuru, the one who had utterly defeated me in my previous life. Snow fluttered onto his still youthful face. The glance he cast my way remained as cold as ever. Gu 11. Our marriage is off. The crown prince's consort will only ever be Yuru. His gaze then turned to Sun Yuru beside him, her smile radiant as a flower, filled with tender affection. Snowflakes swirled down, carried by the wind, blurring the world before my eyes. Yet my heart remained crystal clear. I understood perfectly well why Xiao Zicheng had come to speak of this annulment. As the sole daughter of the current chancellor, my status was exalted, and our betrothal had been bestowed by the emperor himself. If he had directly petitioned to annul the marriage, it would not only have defied the emperor's will but also incurred my father's displeasure. Such an act could have jeopardized his very position as crown prince. However, if both parties mutually agreed to the annulment, it would pose no issue. But he knew full well that I cherished him. At 13, when I accompanied my father to the palace to present our respects, I first encountered Xiao Zicheng in the imperial garden. He was leaning against the corridor, reading, and I was struck by his divine beauty. He was so strikingly handsome, rosy lips, pearly teeth, and eyes as dark and brilliant as stars. Though an air of aloofness surrounded him, I couldn't help but want to draw near. Only later did I learn he was the crown prince. That year, he was 16. After that, I constantly pestered my elder brother, who served as a tutor in the palace, to bring me there all for the chance to catch a glimpse of him. Over time, everyone noticed my feelings for him. When the emperor learned of this, he decreed our marriage to be consummated after my coming-of-age ceremony. The day the imperial edict arrived, spring blossomed in the capital, my heart light with joy. I rode out to seek the season's beauty. Outside the palace walls, I encountered him as he left court. Overcome with delight, I called out from afar, "Your Highness, the crown prince." He turned to look at me. In the crisp breeze, my sleeves fluttered, the crimson ribbon in my hair dancing. I beamed brightly from my horse. He suddenly seemed lost in thought, staring at me for a long moment. Only when I dismounted and stood before him did he snap back to reality, clearing his throat uncomfortably twice before saying, "Having been granted the title of crown princess, your conduct ought to be dignified and proper. How can you be so unrestrained and unconventional?" My smile froze instantly, yet a blush crept into my cheeks. For over a decade, I.D. lived freely, unrestrained. I knew nothing of poetry, music, or the arts expected of a lady. But I.D. mastered horseback riding, kuju, and archery alongside my brothers. From that day on, I set aside my kuju ball and bow, dedicating myself entirely to learning how to be a proper crown prince's consort. 2 years passed, and I reigned in all my wildness. For him, I transformed myself into a proper young lady who smiled without showing teeth and walked with a swaying skirt. On my 14th birthday, he gave me a pair of matching pendants. I wore them daily as tokens of our affection, believing he had chosen me. Yet during the autumn hunt, his heart turned toward Sun Yuru, that lively, spirited, and unrestrained girl. Today, he would rather relinquish his position as chancellor than abandon his betrothal to me for the daughter of a 6th-rank cavalry officer. Amidst the swirling snowstorm, I returned the token to him. Then so be it. As His Royal Highness the Crown Prince wishes. Xiao Zicheng seemed taken aback, his dark eyes fixed on me as he asked in a deep voice, Ji Yushi, are you truly sincere? I paused, but quickly understood. Before, I had been so enamored with him, doing countless things to win his favor. He loved orchids, so I learned to grow one and presented it to him, though I'd never tended plants before. When he grew weary from reading, I personally learned to cook nourishing soups and delivered them to his residence. For him, I patiently mastered the arts of music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, abandoning all my former passions, even sacrificing my own identity. Yet today, I remained so calm and composed, readily agreeing to his annulment. No wonder he asked that question. I smiled, stepping past the two before me to gaze at the vast, white expanse beyond. Yes, since I hold no place in your heart, rather than cling to each other in mutual torment, it's better to let go cleanly. This is for the best for both of us, isn't it? Xiao Zicheng seemed taken aback by my words, as if surprised that a girl barely past her coming-of-age ceremony could possess such resolve. Indeed, had I not lived through my previous life, how could I have grasped this truth? In my past existence, I knew full well he had someone else in his heart. Yet I stubbornly refused to call off the engagement, biting back the bitterness in my heart. I told him that even if he didn't marry me, given Sun Yuru's status, the emperor would never allow her to become crown princess. But if I became crown princess, I could help him take Sun Yuru as a secondary consort. He glared at me, his face etched with scorn and contempt, yet ultimately said nothing. He simply left with Sun Yuru. Back then, my insistence on marrying him wasn't born of greed for the crown princess or empress title, it was because I was utterly, hopelessly in love with him. I naively believed that by marrying him, staying by his side, and treating him well, the day would come when he would love me too. But later I learned how wrong I was. On our wedding night, he stood before me and said coldly, I promised Yuru we would be together for life. Ji Yushi, since you refuse to call off the marriage and insist on being crown princess, then be it so. He did not lift my red veil or draw back my golden curtain before leaving me alone, sitting in silence all night. After that day, he never set foot in my chambers again. Soon after, he married Sun Yuru. They were deeply devoted, their union harmonious as Qin and Se. He declared before me and the servants of the crown prince's residence, the secondary consort is the true mistress of this household. Let everyone recognize their place. The servants all knew Sun Yuru was the crown prince's true favorite, and their glances toward me were laced with pity. I had considered seeking a divorce, but then the emperor fell gravely ill, and the struggle for succession erupted. I could not bear to see him fall into despair after losing power, nor watch him waste away with worry. So I pleaded with my father to help him recruit talent, even using my dowry to buy support for him. After the emperor passed away, he ascended the throne without incident. Yet his first act as emperor was to crown Sun Yuru empress and promote her father, Sun Qixiao, to a second-rank minister. This violated court etiquette, prompting censors to protest, me father and elder brother among them. In a fit of rage, he dismissed my father from office and exiled him from the capital. After years as chancellor, serving the nation and its people with unwavering loyalty, my father faced this calamity just as he prepared to retire to his hometown. I knelt outside Yugong Palace, drenched in rain, begging for mercy. Inside, he played with crickets with Sun Yuru, their laughter piercing my ears. After nightfall, he emerged to see me, yet spoke only coldly. You once claimed Yuru's status was unworthy of a crown princess. Now I shall show you who truly is unworthy. I stood frozen in the rain. All this suffering had been caused by me, because I loved the wrong man. Stubbornly refusing to give up my marriage to him, when news reached me that my father had died in exile. I was gazing at the patch of sky visible through the four corners of the high walls. To waste my youth within these four walls was worse than trading my life for the G family's peace. I hanged myself from the locust tree in the palace grounds. Beneath it lay only our broken, intertwined pendant. Shattered and scattered. Countless times I regretted it, then regretted meeting him in the imperial garden. Regretted my foolish devotion. But my deepest regret was not agreeing to his request to annul our betrothal when he first asked. Heaven took pity on me, granting me rebirth on the day of my coming-of-age ceremony. How could I possibly repeat the mistakes of my past life? So the betrothal was annulled. When father told me the news, he seemed unconcerned. Yet the pain in his eyes as he looked at me was impossible to hide. He always knew of my feelings for the crown prince. Hearing that the crown prince had pledged himself to another, he naturally assumed I was powerless to resist. Yet, fearing to bring me pain, he held back, never daring to ask more. This father who cherished me like a precious treasure in the palm of his hand in my past life, he died of illness in exile, never finding peace, all because I loved the wrong man. My eyes grew misty, and I hastily took a deep breath to suppress the tears. Then, linking my arm through his, I said cheerfully, "Father, I never wanted to be a proper, dignified crown princess consort. I just want to ride horses, shoot arrows, and play kuju with my brotherto, be that carefree, unrestrained young lady of the prime minister's household again." Father patted my hand gently, his expression relaxing considerably. Good, good. Our Sierra should never have been bound by all those pointless rules. Free and unfettered, that's how it should be. In time, father will find you a fine husband. My face held a smile, but inside, tears threatened to spill. In this life, I don't seek a fine husband. I only wish to stay far from Xiao Zicheng, to spare those who love me from worry, and to prevent father from enduring undeserved suffering. Not wanting father to notice my unease, I joked, "Then I want one more handsome than the crown prince." No sooner had the words left my mouth than a teasing voice came from outside the door. "I'm quite handsome myself. Would Sierra consider me?" I followed the voice and saw the fifth prince, Xiao Yichen. He walked in with a smile, paid his respects to father, then stood before me, his beautiful phoenix-like eyes fixed on me. A teasing smile still lingered at the corners of his thin, delicate lips. Looking at him, I found myself momentarily lost. I couldn't recall how long it had been since I'd seen such vibrant springtime radiance on his face. Xiao Yichen and I had been childhood friends since we were little. I mastered horseback riding, kuju, and archery down to the last detail. And his influence was undeniable in that, though a year older than me, he never acted like an older brother. Instead, he loved bickering and roughhousing with me day in and day out. Those carefree, joyful days of childhood were mostly spent with him by my side. Yet after I became the crown prince's betrothed, he grew increasingly distant. I remember the day of my betrothal. He came to seek me out at the chancellor's residence. Upon seeing me, he urgently asked, "Sierra, do you truly wish to marry the crown prince?" After receiving my affirmative answer, he said nothing, his face darkening as he left. Later, as I learned embroidery and calligraphy for the crown prince arts, he always detested me. Once bright smile gradually faded. He thought it utterly foolish to lose myself for another man and couldn't resist trying to dissuade me. But by then, I was hopelessly entangled in my affection for the crown prince, dismissing his words with indifference. In the end, he only gazed deeply at me and murmured, "I hope he's worth it." I imagine he must have been deeply disappointed in me, especially in my past life. When he learned the crown prince had pledged himself to Sun Yuru, yet I insisted on marrying him anyway, was so enraged he refused to speak to me again. I still remember the last time I saw him in that past life. Deep within the palace walls, Xiao Zicheng had just made Sun Yuru his empress. The censors who had fiercely opposed it fell silent after my father was dismissed and exiled. My elder brother, to protect the Ji family, could only swallow his anger. Only he refused to relent, persistently petitioning the emperor to make me empress instead. By then, he had lost all hope in me, yet stubbornly continued fighting for power and glory on my behalf. I secretly sent word through a messenger, begging him not to risk himself for me anymore. They say he stood beneath the lofty palace walls, silent for a long time, before finally letting out a deep sigh and whispering hoarsely, "But she truly deserves the very best." Later, he indeed angered the emperor and was banished from the capital. Before his departure, he seized the final opportunity to enter the palace and pay his respects to the Dowager Empress, coming to see me, seeing my cold, dilapidated palace. His face darkened like clouds obscuring the sun. He lowered his gaze and asked, "Would you leave the capital with me?" I looked out the window at the withered leaves drifting in the wind and shook my head gently. It wasn't that I didn't want to, but how could it be so simple? I simply couldn't bear to have him risk himself for me again. He said nothing more, sitting there in silence. We both knew clearly that from this day forward, we would scarcely have another chance to meet. This farewell might well be our final parting. Even on the day I took my own life, I still remembered the last glance he cast back at me as he left, how bitterly sorrowful and reluctant it was to have him stand before me again in this lifetime, wearing such a radiant smile. How could it not fill me with joy? "What are you thinking?" He bent his finger and tapped my forehead lightly, snapping back to reality. I squinted and smiled at him. "You're handsome enough. But what a mouth you have." Xiao Chen froze, then feigned anger, enunciating each syllable. "Ji, you, chi." I watched him with a smile, along with the snowflakes swirling down in the courtyard. So this winter's snow could be this beautiful. Late winter in Xinjiang still cloaked everything in silver. Though horseback kuju was out of the question, I refused to stay cooped up indoors. When the snow and wind finally subsided that day, I headed to the tea tasting pavilion in the East Market for some leisure. The tea tasting pavilion was a renowned tea house in Xinjiang. Everyone from royal princes and nobles to common folk loved coming here to listen to music and sip tea. Unexpectedly, as I approached the entrance, I encountered Sun Yuru emerging from within. Her complexion was poor, her eyes slightly reddened, as if she had just quarreled with someone. I had no desire to engage, and began to walk around her. Yet, she blocked my path. I halted and looked up, asking, "What is this?" She gave a cold laugh and snapped at me. "Ji Yushi, you agreed to break off your engagement with His Royal Highness the Crown Prince in public. Yet behind the scenes, you leverage your father's influence to prevent him from making me his crown princess. How utterly disgusting." I froze. I heard the emperor had angrily rejected the crown prince's request to make Sun Yuru his crown princess, citing her lowly background and the fact that appointing a new crown princess so soon after my engagement was broken would inevitably tarnish my father's reputation. Yet she seemed to blame me entirely for this outcome. I replied, speechless. "So, I possess such influence. Why then did you not curry favor with me, but instead treat me with such disrespect?" Sun Yuru sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "Ji Yushi, what do you have to be proud of? His Royal Highness the Crown Prince chose me, the daughter of a mere 6th-rank military officer, over you, the legitimate daughter of the esteemed Prime Minister Liu. Don't you feel ashamed?" I felt a bit dazed. Similar words had been spoken by her in my previous life, at the imperial banquet in my past existence. I, as crown princess, was seated at the same table as the crown prince, while Sun Yuru could only sit far away. After the banquet, she stormed into my chambers, seething with resentment, and sneered, "Ji Yushi, don't get too cocky. You've got nothing on me except your birth. The one sitting beside the crown prince will be me sooner or later." Though worn down by her constant harassment, I couldn't help but retort when faced with such scorn. But today, it was me sitting beside the crown prince. wasn't it? Enraged, Sun Yuru raised her hand to strike me, only for me to seize and fling it away. Losing her balance, she twisted her ankle, mistaking my action for malice. The crown prince lashed out, delivering a vicious slap across my face, cherished like a precious jewel in the Ji household. Doused in affection by my parents and brothers, I had never endured such humiliation. That slap, its pain is something I could never forget. Even if I lived 100 lifetimes, that was His Royal Highness' own blindness. What does it have to do with Sierra? Why should she feel ashamed? Xiao Chen's voice snapped me back to the present. He had arrived unnoticed, now standing behind me, his gaze fixed coldly on Sun Yuru. In my humble opinion, even setting aside family background, her beauty and character surpass yours 100-fold. The chill in my heart melted instantly. While Sun Yuru's face flushed alternately crimson and ashen, yet she couldn't utter a word. At that moment, the crown prince emerged from the tea house, his expression displeased, spotting the three of us. His pace faltered briefly. Sun Yuru shot him a mournful glance before climbing into the nearby carriage. The crown prince merely frowned, offering no words to detain her. How rare, having lived 2 lifetimes. This was the first time I'd ever seen them like this. Xiao Chen had always been cold toward his imperial brother, and I myself had little desire to speak with him. After offering a curtsy, I turned to head toward the tea-tasting pavilion. Ji Yushi. After taking a few steps, the crown prince called out to me from behind. My footsteps halted as I heard him say, "It has been too long since I last tasted your milk lotus root starch cakes." Snow fluttered down again, scattered and sparse. In the past, to win his favor, Iho had never touched kitchen work, had stubbornly mastered several pastries and soups. Each time I finished making them, I would personally deliver them to the crown prince's residence. Yet he seemed indifferent, never showing even a hint of delight. Yet today he spoke thus, leaving me unsure whether to laugh or sigh. I turned to face him and said softly, "The crown prince would surely prefer to taste Sun Yuru's creations. If you wish, I can have the matron from our residence teach her." A flicker of unease crossed the crown prince's brow before he finally forced out a few words. "That won't be necessary." I paid him no further mind, taking Xiao Chen's hand and continuing onward. In my past life, shortly after marrying him, I learned had injured his spleen and stomach from a cold. I carefully simmered a soup of Chinese yam and pork ribs and sent a maid to deliver it to him. The maid returned to report that after receiving the bowl, he casually poured its contents to the cat kept by Sun Yuru. From that day on, I never cooked for him again. Some people simply aren't worth your effort and concern. It was a lesson I learned far too late in my previous life. After walking a few steps, I sensed Xiao Chen beside me had grown unusually quiet. I looked up to find him gazing at me with a faint, crooked smiley look that was almost a smile, yet not quite. I stopped in my tracks, waiting for him to continue. He studied me for a long moment before murmuring softly, "Sun Yuru has recently fallen out with His Imperial Highness. Yesterday, His Majesty even called her unreasonable. Why not seize this chance to make him more milk and water chestnut cakes?" In his tone, I detected an inexplicable hint of bitterness. After breaking off my engagement to the crown prince, Xiao Chen gradually resumed the childhood closeness we once shared. Yet he seldom mentioned matters concerning the crown prince in my presence. Hearing him speak thus today, I couldn't help but feel a touch of surprise. I stared at him steadily for a moment before replying earnestly, "Having broken off our engagement, I have come to a clear understanding. I will never again harbor affection for him, nor will I have any further entanglement with him. How he conducts himself with others is none of my concern." Xiao Chen's eyes suddenly shone like stars. "Truly," I nodded. Suddenly, the corners of his lips lifted. Beneath his sword-like brows, his eyes, bright as stars, curved into a smile so radiant it could almost melt the winter snow. Returning to the manor, I saw servants hanging festive lanterns and only then realized the lantern festival was approaching. In those final years of my past life, time always seemed to crawl by. After a rebirth, cherished by my parents and elder brother at home, living freely and unrestrained, I finally understood how swiftly time flies. On the night of the Lantern Festival, the capital city of Xinjiang was especially bustling. Thousands of lantern trees shone brightly. Hundreds of flower-shaped fireworks bloomed, and the streets were filled with people admiring the lights and vendors selling all sorts of trinkets. I strolled through the lantern market with my maid, Kaiyun. Yet, amidst this splendor, I couldn't help but feel a pang of emotion. In my previous life, it was on this very day that I married him. This day, meant to be filled with joy and celebration, found me sitting alone in my chamber. The wedding candles burned down to ashes, yet he never came to lift my red veil. How utterly lonely and desolate it was. That lantern is so beautiful. Miss, would you like to take a look? Kaiyun's voice snapped me back to the present. Following the direction of her finger, I saw the dazzling array of lanterns before the vendor. Visiting the lantern fair without buying a lantern would hardly be complete. After much deliberation, I finally picked up a palace lantern painted with orchids. Kaiyun looked at the lantern in my hand and remarked, "The orchids on this lantern are quite lovely, aren't they?" I nodded. The orchid depicted here is the most difficult to cultivate, the Huilan orchid. It requires rich, leaf-mold soil, well-aerated roots, and infrequent watering. It's extremely delicate, but its blooms are truly exquisite. Kaiyun seemed to recall something, suddenly realizing with a start, "Miss, wasn't that Cymbidium orchid you painstakingly cultivated for the crown prince?" As soon as the words left her mouth, she clamped her lips shut, likely realizing her slip. I smiled, unconcerned. If this young lady truly likes it, why not take one? The vendor across the way offered eagerly. I shook my head, setting down the palace lantern but picking up a rabbit lantern nearby instead. "I'll take this one." On the lantern festival when I was 10, a cold kept me from visiting the lantern market. Lying bored in bed, Xiao Chen entered carrying a rabbit lantern for me. It instantly ignited joy in my heart. That rabbit lantern later hung beneath the eaves of my boudoir. The day autumn winds tore it down and shattered it. I cried for a long, long time. Ever since, rabbit lanterns have been my favorite. After paying, I turned to leave, smiling as I carried the rabbit lantern only to collide with someone behind me. "My apologies." I stepped back and apologized to the person. "It's nothing." It was a familiar voice. I looked up and saw the crown prince dressed in his everyday robes. I was somewhat surprised. Why was he here? And why was he behind me? His dark eyes fixed on me, as if deep in thought. I curtsied in greeting, then pulled Kaiyun to leave, only to have him seize my wrist. The next moment, he lowered his eyes and murmured softly, "Ji Yushi, would you cultivate another orchid for me?" I paused, startled. He had never spoken to me so gently before, even though I had always treated him with utmost care. Knowing he loved orchids, Iho had never tended plants before, stubbornly learned to care for over a dozen Cymbidium orchids. After nurturing them meticulously through the entire winter, only one remained that bloomed. I joyfully presented it to him, but he merely set it aside on the windowsill. Before long, it withered. How could he now casually request, "Grow another orchid for me"? I withdrew my hand, retorting irritably, "I'm sorry, Your Highness. I won't grow orchids anymore." He furrowed his brow, yet showed no anger. His voice remained calm as he asked, "Ji Yushi, you truly wish to leave me?" I froze, finding him utterly ridiculous. Once, my fiery heart was trampled underfoot by him. My hatred for him was not nearly enough. Suppressing my impatience, I replied coolly, "Your Highness, our betrothal is dissolved. Sun Yuru is the one you truly love. Henceforth, it would be best to avoid such words that invite misunderstanding." He gave a bitter smile and shook his head helplessly. I paid him no further mind and left with Kaiyun. After encountering the crown prince, my enthusiasm for strolling through the Lantern Festival had cooled considerably. Kaiyun had been with me since childhood. In her eyes, I was the most beautiful and finest young lady in Xinjiang. If the crown prince did not cherish me, it was his fault. Noticing my gloomy expression, she mumbled as we walked. Why did we run into the crown prince instead of the fifth prince? Her words amused me, and I couldn't resist teasing her. Do you think the fifth prince is more handsome? Kaiyun flushed, blushing as she protested. Miss, you're teasing me again. After a moment of silence, she looked at me earnestly and said, Miss, whenever you met the crown prince before, you'd sit by the window in a daze after returning home, always looking so disappointed. But when you met the fifth prince, it was different. How was it different? I asked her with a smile, curious. The corners of your eyes and brows would hold a smile. Even I could sense the ease and joy in your heart. I paused, startled, reflecting carefully. It seemed she was right. Had Kaiyun not mentioned it today, I wouldn't have realized that what the crown prince gave me had never been joy from the start. I truly don't know why I was so fixated on him in my past life. As for Xiao Chen, he was dispatched on an imperial tour to Jiangnan a few days ago. I wonder when he'll return. Strangely, I found myself missing him. As winter gave way to spring, most of the snow in Xinjiang had melted away. My elder brother, ever doting on me, heard of a new horse racing track opening in the city's outskirts. Seizing this day of leave, he brought me here to race horses. I chose a white stallion and spurred it into a gallop. The spring breeze still carried a chill, yet it couldn't dampen the exhilaration in my heart. After 2 laps, someone behind me spurred their horse to keep pace, seemingly intent on a race. I assumed it must be my brother, wanting to test my skills since I hadn't ridden in a while. I gathered my strength, spurred my horse harder, and left him behind. After 2 more laps, I reined in my horse, turned it around, and called back with a smile, Brother, I win. The words barely left my lips when I froze. The rider behind me wasn't my brother, it was Xiao Chen. After a month apart, he seemed even more handsome. He reined in his horse before me, his eyes sparkling with a smile. Sierra, I'm back. My lips curved upward. His image, dark hair, golden crown, silver saddle, white steed filled my eyes, and my heartbeat suddenly quickened for a few seconds. Then, joy spread from the depths of my heart to every limb and bone. Sunlight filtered through the clouds, warming us gently. New green leaves were just emerging on the nearby trees, creating a serene and beautiful scene. My desire to ride vanished. I led the horse to lean against a tree, listening as he recounted his journey through the south. He said the final stop on his tour was Nangxiang, a place less bustling than the capital, yet a picturesque water town of whitewashed walls, black-tiled roofs, and bridges over flowing streams. He confessed that while in Nanxiang, an indescribable emotion had lingered in his heart. Suddenly, I recalled that in my past life, the place where he was exiled was Nanxiang. He looked at me with eyes dark and intense, a level of seriousness I had never seen before. Sierra, while I was in Nanxiang, I kept thinking of a question I wanted to ask you when I returned. He took from his robe a hairpin that shimmered with iridescent light, its gold filigree inlaid with a vivid red bean. If the chance arises, would you be willing to accompany me to admire the spring scenery of Jiangnan? In that instant, I thought I glimpsed some hidden emotion in his brows and eyes. I recalled those events once more. In a past life, he stood beneath the palace walls, sighing deeply. But she truly deserves the very best. He risked everything to see me, lowering his gaze as he asked, would you be willing to leave the capital with me? In this life, when I told him I would never favor the crown prince again, his eyes suddenly shone like stars. Though the capital abounded with noble ladies who admired him, I alone held his affection. Sunlight seemed to pierce the clouds within my heart, dispelling the fog and revealing his true feelings. Gazing at him, Warmth overflowed from my heart, and the corners of my eyes and brows softened with springtime tenderness. Before I could take the hairpin, I caught sight of my elder brother and the crown prince galloping toward us. In moments, they halted before us, though the crown prince remained astride his horse, his gaze fixed on the hairpin in Xiao Chen's hand, his expression darkening instantly. Xiao Chen paid no heed, merely lowering the hand holding the hairpin. My elder brother dismounted and approached me, saying, "Sire, I've long awaited your return. I happened upon the crown prince and came to seek you. So you were conversing with the prince here?" A trace of sarcasm flickered in the crown prince's eyes as he addressed Xiao Chen coldly. "My royal brother arrived in the capital only last night. Yet this morning he rides alongside Yushi. Such profound friendship indeed." Xiao Chen chuckled lightly, replying unhurriedly, "My affairs need not trouble your royal highness. But as for you, upon my return, I heard that Sun Yuru has repeatedly sought an audience with you, only to be denied. I find that most surprising." Hearing this, I couldn't help but look up in surprise, meeting the crown prince's gaze. Before, I mistakenly took her willfulness for spontaneity and freedom, which led me to love her and tolerate her. Now, I have recognized my own heart. My affection lies elsewhere. So naturally, I must sever ties with her completely. Throughout this speech, his gaze remained fixed on me. For a moment, I couldn't discern whether he was responding to Xiao Chen or deliberately addressing me. On the day of my coming-of-age ceremony, he and Sun Yuru had been so deeply entwined in affection. Yet, from winter to spring, he had grown so utterly resolute toward her. Shocked, I blurted out, "So the crown prince is this fickle?" His expression darkened instantly, his gaze lingering on me as if he wanted to say something but held back. My brother pulled me close and whispered sternly, "Sire, don't speak recklessly. It's getting late. We should return to the mansion." Though I hadn't yet had my fill of horseback riding, I nodded in agreement. Before departing, I extended my hand toward Xiao Chen and smiled. "Hand it over." Xiao Chen paused, then realized what I wanted. His expression shifted from calm to delight, but instead of placing the hairpin in my hand, he took a step closer and gently tucked it into my hair. In that instant, I felt my cheeks grow slightly warm. I met his tender gaze with a smile, gently tilting my head to hear the hairpin jingle softly. Somehow, that sound struck me as exceptionally melodious, effortlessly plucking at my heartstrings. I waved to Xiao Chen, ignoring the crown prince standing nearby with an icy glare, and swiftly mounted my horse. But as I cracked the whip and spurred the horse forward, I faintly heard the crown prince's cold voice echoing behind me. "My royal brother knows how to win Aladdin's favor. It seems the time has come to discuss a marriage." Several days later, the crown prince sent messengers bearing a dazzling array of jewelry. Among them were 3 hairpins alone. In my past life, aside from that token of mutual devotion, I had never accepted any other gift from him. It wouldn't have mattered much. But seeing him constantly surprise Sun Yuru with gifts inevitably stirred a bitter ache within me. Now that the betrothal was dissolved, I harbored no expectations for him. His sudden offering of such a pile of jewelry truly took me by surprise. Just as I was about to have the jewels returned, I received an imperial summons, ordering me to enter the palace for an audience with His Majesty. Only upon arriving at the palace did I learn that the crown prince had knelt before the imperial study all night long, pleading for the emperor to renew our betrothal. The emperor had watched me grow up and cherished me deeply. He had long disapproved of the crown prince's betrayal of me. So naturally, he would now respect my wishes. Standing before the desk in the imperial study, I declared firmly to the emperor, "This humble daughter refuses." The emperor made no attempt to dissuade me, merely sighing softly before saying no more. Yet as I was leaving the imperial study, he suddenly spoke. "Shower, you and Chainer are quite close. When you have a moment, please go and persuade him for me." That stubborn temper of Hisht rather face punishment than discuss marriage with Admiral Lee's daughter. It truly gives me a headache. Sitting in the carriage returning to the Ji residence, I recalled the emperor's words. Li Yunj, the eldest daughter of Admiral Li, had long harbored feelings for Xiao Chen, declaring she would marry no one but him. The emperor, mindful of Admiral Li's distinguished service, wished to facilitate the match, yet Xiao Chen remained resolute, utterly unyielding. In a fit of anger, the emperor sentenced him to 20 strokes of the cane. However, as this matter touched upon the dignity of a prince, it was kept private. He should now be recuperating in bed at the mansion, concerned for his injuries. I instructed the coachman to divert to the prince's residence. Upon arriving at the prince's residence, Xiao Chen was seen in his nightclothes, draped in an outer robe, taking air in the courtyard. After several days apart, he appeared somewhat thinner, his chiseled features appearing even more stern. His brow was slightly furrowed, likely still in pain from his injuries. Yet, upon seeing me, his eyes suddenly brightened with surprise and delight. "Sire, why have you come?" Hiding my concern, I feigned nonchalance, to see if you'll still be able to ride with me, and to act as an envoy for His Majesty. Xiao Chen froze, his smile stiffening. "Lobbyist, could it be you wish to persuade me to marry Li Yunj?" Seeing his displeased expression, I couldn't help but find it amusing. I continued teasing him. "Why not? Miss Li comes from a distinguished family, possesses beauty and virtue, and is deeply devoted to you. I think she would be a perfect match for you." Xiao Chen seethed, gritting his teeth. This capital teems with noble ladies meeting those criteria. Am I supposed to be a perfect match for every single one? I gazed at him with a mischievous smile, growing bolder. "Well, if you can handle it, marrying them all wouldn't be out of the question." He froze, suddenly realizing I was toying with him. His dark, furrowed brows gradually relaxed. He curved his lips, slowly drawing near until his mouth brushed my ear. His voice was low and husky. "In my opinion, there's only one noble lady in Xinjiang truly suited for meth, one who accepted my longing hairpin." His warm breath tickled my cheek, making even my earlobes flush crimson. Seeing my blush, he laughed heartily. After a moment, his smile faded. He gazed deeply at me, then raised his hand to brush the hairpin at my temple. "Sire," he murmured earnestly, "it truly suits you." I couldn't tell if he was praising the hairpin or me. No sooner had I returned to the Ji residence than I heard the crown prince had come calling. He must have learned of my refusal to marry and sought me out. Sure enough, shortly after, a servant arrived to announce father summoned me to the front hall. Between the rear courtyard and the front hall lay a long connecting corridor. At its end, I encountered the crown prince. He stood beneath the eaves, tall and imposing, his graceful and handsome features unchanged from the day I first met him in the imperial garden. Yet, times had changed, and my heart no longer stirred for him. I bowed slightly in greeting. As I rose, I caught his gaze flickering toward the red bean hairpin in my temple, his expression darkening. "I have given you many hairpins. Do you dislike them?" I shook my head, replying softly, "Not at all. It is simply that I cannot accept gifts for which I have done nothing to deserve." "Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness. I shall have someone return those trinkets to the Crown Prince's residence later." The Crown Prince remained silent for a long while before speaking slowly. "Yushi, I know you resent me." I was momentarily speechless. In my past life, I hadn't merely resented him, I had hated him to the core. But in this life, I only wished to keep my distance from him. That was all. But I never meant to hurt you. Before, you always appeared so obedient and proper, going to great lengths to be kind to me. Though I understood your affection, I couldn't help but find you dull. Yet after breaking off our engagement and losing sight of you, I found myself thinking of you often, remembering how lively you were when you galloped on horseback. He took a step closer, lowered his gaze to meet mine, and whispered softly, Only after all this time have I realized you are the crown princess I truly cherish. Will you forgive me?" As he spoke these words, a hint of regret flickered in his eyes. He was always so proud and aloof. When had he ever spoken to anyone in such a submissive tone? Yet my heart felt no joy at that moment. I merely stared at him with slightly widened eyes, my body involuntarily taking a step back. "I am not. The crown prince wants Sun Yuru as his crown princess." His expression shifted uncomfortably, likely recalling his own emphatic declaration. "My crown princess can only be Yuru. I once believed I preferred a passionate, spirited woman like Sun Yuru, yet before I could wed her as crown princess, she became clingy and discourteous, utterly repulsive. Now I see she doesn't hold a candle to you. I never imagined, in this lifetime, I would hear such words from his mouth. In my past life, his heart belonged solely to Sun Yuru. From beginning to end, he never spared me a single glance. Because I refused to annul the betrothal, they blamed me for Sun Yuru failing to become crown princess, turning me into the villain they both despised. United in their hatred, they grew ever more affectionate and inseparable. I endured his contempt and humiliation my entire life, until my heart grew cold and I ended it all by hanging myself. But in this life, I agreed to the annulment, and Sun Yuru still failed to become crown princess. Yet now, I've earned this remark from him. Sun Yuru doesn't hold a candle to me. How tragic. How laughable. I tilted my head slightly, watching the glazed wind chimes hanging from the corridor sway and chime softly in the breeze. Unbidden, memories surfaced of those lonely days in my past life, when the tinkling of suspended bells would drift from the palace eaves. My long quiet heart surged once more with bitter sorrow and bitterness. "Your Highness, whom you favor is none of my concern, but your crown princess will never be me." After receiving Xiao Chen's hairpin of longing, I intended to gift him a sachet in return. Yet my embroidery skills were poor. After months of labor, I had only completed half. Seated in the flickering candlelight, I stitched mandarin ducks, thread by thread. Kaiyun trimmed the candle wick beside me and couldn't help sighing. "Miss, when you learned needlework before, you looked so impatient and troubled just embroidering 2 peach blossoms on a handkerchief. Yet now, embroidering this mandarin duck sachets for the 5th prince. Not only are you full of patience, but the joy in your heart seems ready to overflow from your eyes and brows. This token of affection truly is extraordinary." I laughed and scolded her. Nonsense. But Kaiyun was right. Thinking of Xiao Chen made my lips curve upward, my heart brimming with joy. I only waited to present him with this embroidered pouch, so he might understand my feelings. Yet, before the pouch was finished, a great calamity struck Xinjing. The emperor suddenly fell gravely ill, and Crown Prince Xiao Zicheng assumed regency. When the news reached us, I recalled my past life. The emperor's demise had occurred precisely at the end of summer that year. Yet unlike my previous existence, where succession struggles raged fiercely at this time, no such turmoil seemed imminent now. In my past life, the crown prince's neglect of state affairs due to Sun Yuru had allowed the 3rd prince's faction to rise, fueling his bid for the throne. Now, with the crown prince still unmarried, such worries were unnecessary. Sure enough, before autumn arrived, the emperor passed away, and the crown prince ascended the throne. Only days after Xiao Zicheng's coronation, he summoned me to the palace, dressed in imperial robes and crowned with a golden diadem, seated upon a vermilion lacquered, golden-laid throne. He already possessed the majestic bearing of an emperor commanding the realm. He said, "Yu Shi, I owe you the position of crown princess. Now I repay you with the title of empress. Is that acceptable?" I shook my head, but before the words of refusal could leave my lips, he cut me off. "Think carefully before you answer." I understood immediately. His words were an imperial decree disguised as sweet talk, an edict concerning the safety of the Ji family. The title of empress, which ministers begged for me in vain in my past life, was now being forced upon me through threats and enticements in this one utterly laughable. My hands, curled within my sleeves, grew colder by the moment. I replied coldly, "If you won't allow me to defy the edict, why bother asking my opinion?" He descended the steps slowly, standing before me. His eyes unexpectedly reddened. "Yushi, I can forego 3,000 beauties, but I cannot lose you." The day before I entered the palace, Xiao Chen set off for the southern frontier. He had recently petitioned the emperor to serve as governor there, and the emperor had granted his request. I lay awake all night. At dawn, I rode my horse to the outskirts of the capital and hid on a small hillside by the roadside, just to catch a last glimpse of him from afar. As the prince's carriage vanished into the distance, I stood in the chilly autumn wind, gazing at the embroidered sachets I had finished, tears soaking my sleeves. Xiao Chen, in this lifetime, I will never again have the chance to accompany you to admire the spring of Jiangnan. That day, he came to the Ji residence seeking me, asking if I truly wished to enter the palace as empress. I asked him, "What if I do? What if I don't?" Suddenly, his expression grew grave as he looked into my eyes. "If you do, then I shall wish you 100 years of bliss with His Majesty, blessed with children and grandchildren. If you don't, I will raise an army for you even if it means dying. I will protect you by my side." Xiao Chen commanded an army of 100,000, possessed both literary and martial talents, and enjoyed widespread support in the court. Had he not been utterly disinterested in the throne, he might well have challenged the crown prince for the succession, but such a path would inevitably bring suffering to the innocent common folk. How could I not understand the pain and reluctance hidden in his words? In my past life, Xiao Zicheng may have betrayed my Ji family, but he was still a capable ruler. Moreover, Xiao Chen had always cherished his freedom, confined within those palace walls. No amount of power or splendor could bring him happiness. The only answer I could give him, even if it went against my heart, was this: to be his empress is my wish. He fell silent, sitting there quietly, just as he had during our final meeting in my past life. Finally, he lifted his head and spoke, each word deliberate. "Sierra, in this life, you must find peace and joy, free from sorrow." I nodded. Yet after he turned and left, tears streamed down my face. "But Xiao Chen, if you are not by my side in this life, how could I ever know joy and freedom from sorrow?" I tucked away my red bean hairpin and entered the palace, awaiting the day I would be crowned empress. Xiao Zicheng renovated the most opulent palace within the palace grounds for me, naming it Shilon Palace. I refused it, choosing instead the dilapidated and cramped Suiwei Palace from my past life. For Shilon Palace was none other than the Yuguan Palace where Sun Yuru had resided in my previous existence. I did not wish to be wounded anew each time I passed through its gates, reliving that rainy night when she knelt outside Yuguan Palace. Yet I forgot what could possibly wound me more than Yuguan Palace. I grew increasingly despondent, spending my days sitting beneath that locust tree, lost in sorrow. Often, I didn't even notice Xiao Zicheng standing beside me, but whether I noticed or not made little difference. Before him, I was nothing more than a hollow shell. Once more, I sat beneath the locust tree. A sudden gust of wind stirred the wind chimes hanging from the palace eaves. It stirred my memories. I wondered if autumn in Jiangnan was as bleak and sorrowful as it was in Xinjiang. I wondered if that person in the southern countryside was still well. I sighed. Is life in this palace truly so unbearable for you? I lifted my head to find Xiao Zicheng seated beside me on the stone bench. Since you entered the palace, I have not seen you smile once. You grow ever more silent. Do you still hold a grudge against me? Those events 2 years past were my fault. I am willing to spend the rest of my life making amends. Will you still not forgive me? Xiao Zicheng's brows were deeply furrowed, his eyes filled with concern and tenderness. This Gazian my past life, I could never have begged for even a fraction of it. Yet in this life, it feels like a heavy burden, a shackle. Suddenly, there were words I desperately wanted to tell him. if I became your crown princess. Yet you refused to lift my red veil, never once stepping into my chambers. If you allowed your favored concubine to oppress me, even humiliating me and striking me for her sake. If you exiled my father to a distant land to make her empress, causing his death in exile. If you subjected me to endless humiliation and injustice until my heart grew cold and I took my own life, dare I ask, Your Majesty, could you still utter the word forgiveness so lightly? Xiao Zicheng, though utterly bewildered, answered plainly, Of course not. If I truly did these things to you, even if you never forgave me for all eternity, I would deserve it. I smiled. Yet tears fell from my eyes, seeing me weep for the first time. This emperor whose majesty commanded the realm seemed flustered. He raised his hand to wipe my tears, but I turned my head away. Even if I were already empress, let alone not yet formally installed, I could not bear to be close to him. I rose, bowed, and took my leave, leaving him alone beneath the locust tree, lost in thought. I hadn't seen Xiao Zisheng for several days until today, when he sent word summoning me to Qianqing Palace. Only then did I learn he had been ill for days. Seated on his couch, his face gaunt and pale, he looked greatly weakened. His eyes held a hint of sorrow when he saw me. He said, These past days, I've had a long dream, as if I lived an entire lifetime within it. Upon waking, I thought it merely a dream. Yet every word you asked beneath that locust tree was within it. He spoke each word with great effort. In the dream, you were my crown princess consort. Yet I never treated you kindly. I made Sun Yuru empress, forcing you to kneel outside her palace all night. In the end, you hanged yourself, on that locust tree in Suiwei Palace. I looked at him, my voice calm. His eyes widened slightly, all color draining from his face. He gave a wretched laugh. So, it was all real. Seeing his utterly devastated state, I whispered softly, Your Majesty, I pledged my life to you. Alas, it was for this that I met such an end. In this life, may I be allowed to depart? His eyes reddened for the first time, his voice hoarse as he asked, Truly, can you not forgive me? I lowered my gaze, silent for a long while. He began to cough hoarsely, raising his hand to signal the eunuch beside him. The eunuch immediately understood and escorted me back to my palace. Unexpectedly, he truly cancelled the coronation ceremony and allowed me to leave the palace. On the day of my departure, he did not come to see me. Instead, he sent a jade piece engraved with the character apology through his attendant. The attendant said the emperor had carved it himself through the night. Despite his illness, a jade token of apologia, remorse from his past life that lingered into this one. Yet he lacked even the courage to speak it to my face. As the sun sank below the horizon, the eunuch escorted me down the long palace steps. I turned to look back at the vast forbidden city and caught sight of Xiao Zisheng standing on the high platform, watching me from afar. There he stood, bathed in the fading sunset's glow, yet radiating an inexplicable loneliness and sorrow. Amidst this boundless regret, losing the love he cherished was perhaps heaven's greatest punishment upon him. I continued walking forward, leaving the past behind. The days ahead held boundless skies and vast horizons. It was time to seek my own spring. When I found him in the southern village, he was directing villagers in bridge repairs, dressed in a blue brocade robe. His figure was tall and imposing, his face like carved jade. Amidst the crowd of villagers, he stood out strikingly. I stood nearby, wearing a red bean hairpin, smiling at him, absorbed in his work. He didn't notice me at first, only when several villagers teased him. There's a maiden by the bridge who looks like a fairy descended from heaven. Did he casually glance this way before lowering his head again? In an instant, he froze, then abruptly stood ramrod straight, staring at me with utter disbelief. He strode toward me, stopping before me to examine me from head to toe. Sierra, is it really you? I smiled and nodded. It's me. Joy nearly overflowed from his eyes. How did you come here? I drew the embroidered sachets from my sleeve and placed them in his hands. I've come to accompany you in appreciating the spring beauty of Jiangnan. He looked at the sachets in his hands, as if understanding something, and hesitantly asked, Sierra, you're not going to be empress. I teased him. If that's what you want, I'll return to the capital right now. After saying this, I pretended to leave, and he immediately grabbed my hand. Try leaving. His words carried a distinct edge of gritted teeth. I smiled at the young man before me. The one I longed for so deeply. He drew me gently into his embrace, whispering softly in my ear, Sierra, this lifetime, I've finally waited for you. We stood embraced in this winter's chill, awaiting the coming year to feast our eyes together upon the boundless spring beauty. The end.